This episode of Common Health is brought to you by Reg Lantern. Reg Lantern is a straightforward and easily understandable software platform built to assist community health centers in staying compliant so they can focus on serving their patients rather than paperwork. For health centers that are serious about achieving, managing, and maintaining compliance, Reg Lantern provides a comprehensive approach and is an affordable and valuable solution. Reg Lantern can help your health center. Contact them today at reglantern.com. That's REG, as in regulations, lantern.com. For special discounts, mention that you heard about Reg Lantern on the CommonHealth podcast.
Hello, and welcome to CommonHealth, a podcast brought to you by the Virginia Community Healthcare Association. CommonHealth brings together voices from around Virginia and beyond to discuss all aspects of individual and community health and well-being. I'm Adrienne Harden, Virginia Community Healthcare Association's registered dietitian and nutritionist. The subject of today's podcast actually came to our attention by way of VCHA's annual day of volunteering. Last month, the VCHA team got out of the office and into our community here in Richmond to support the mission of an organization doing incredibly important work in one of Richmond's neighborhoods, Boaz and Ruth. Boaz and Ruth is a nonprofit working on Richmond's north side in the Highland Park neighborhood, and I'll let them talk a little bit more about their unique model and efforts in just a moment. But to give you a snapshot of some of their work, our group of volunteers help sort and tag clothes for their thrift store and even beautify their native garden. What sets Boaz and Ruth apart is their focus on community building, housing, and deep presence in their neighborhood, and I think the success of their model really speaks for itself. Joining us today to talk more about their organization and the value of neighborhood-based work is Boaz and Ruth's president and CEO, Megan Rollins. Megan, welcome to CommonHealth.
Thank you, Adrienne. I'm excited to be here.
We are excited to have you. So, Boaz and Ruth is based in the Highland Park neighborhood. So could you tell us a little more about that neighborhood?
Yeah. So the neighborhood originally was summer homes for folks that lived in the city. And so we are the first streetcar suburb of Richmond. And so we have a lot of Victorian houses, Queen Anne houses, and it's just a beautiful neighborhood of old infrastructure and great community.
Amazing. And has the organization always been based in the same place, like maybe even in the same building?
That's right. Yep. We've been here since 2002. Always in this building. And then over the years, as we'll talk about, we expanded programming and, as nonprofits, missions remain the same, but how we implement that mission changes a little bit. And so we'll talk about how we expanded over the years as well.
Great. And that leads us into wanting to know more about Boaz and Ruth's origin story. Like what led to the organization being founded and also how has it evolved over the years?
Yeah, so our founder was an antique stealer and she was in Richmond. And over the years, the goal of how antique stealers make their money is they go and they purchase things that are maybe not in the best shape. And then they repair them and refinish them and then sell them. And that's where you kind of make your margin. And so over the years, she would do that. And so she started out when Richmond this was in the 70s. And so she would bring on VCU students and they would be repairing and refinishing things. And she noticed that as that was happening in the natural, it was almost also happening internally for the person working on the furniture to see an analogy, right? They didn't feel that they had value or worth. And as they were repairing, they realized, oh, I do too. And this happened organically of them working together. And then over the years, as her business got more successful, she would go on shopping trips in Europe and then bring back a container of furniture. And so she had to hire in additional help. So that came through temporary agencies, right? And oftentimes these folks are great workers, team players. They'd sit down and have lunch for their break. And she'd ask, why is it that you're working for a temporary agency? It seems as if anyone be lucky to have you as an employee. And oftentimes over and over, what people would say is, well, I have a history of incarceration. And so it's a bit of a barrier in terms of, back then you have to think we were much different in terms of how we vetted folks and who we thought were potential good employees. And so over time, she thought, there's something about this. And she felt a calling of, how do I take what it is I'm learning and hearing and figure out what to do? And so she thought maybe she'd start some sort of nonprofit doing just that, some sort of like restoration of people through what she knows best, antiques. And then she turned 60. She had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and she realized, you know what? It's not guaranteed. So now or never. And so Boaz and Ruth was founded. She's also a person that is very, you say no, she figures out the way to say yes. So she was on a Christian women's dinner table and was talking about this vision over and over. And the city council person of our district said, oh, I have a place that you can start this, or at least store the furniture. The other thing that happened was she was talking with another client, and they said, look, we're moving out of town. We want for you to take all of our furniture. We want to give it as a seed to start this project. And then concurrently, someone else came to her and said, we hear you talking about this, but what's it going to take to do it? So I'm going to give you a challenge match. So I'll give you $150,000 if you can match it. She thought, how am I going to do this? Right? Never had any fundraising experience. So she went to the pastor of her church and said, how do I do this? And he said, well, it's too bad you didn't come earlier, because their church was in the middle of a capital campaign. And often when churches are doing that, there's money in the budget set aside for programming and community support. And he said, but the grant closes in 2 weeks. And she said, I'll figure it out. So she wrote the grant. Her church matched the anonymous donor, and Boaz and Ruth was founded.
Wow. What an inspiring story. Wow. I mean, it started off so left, thinking about, antiques and things that may have been really unrelated, and to turn into her faith playing such a strong role, even down to the name, right? Boaz and Ruth makes sense with the book of Ruth. And wow, I'm blown away just hearing that. That's a really cool origin story.
Yeah. I think the origin story of our name is also it's relevant, spanning time. And so here again, she thought she was going to call Boaz and Ruth Gleanings, because it was going to be taking donations and then making them available. And so she was looking in the book of Ruth for a tagline. And the story of the book of Ruth is really short. It's about a family who experiences death of a husband and 2 sons. And so there's 3 widows, right? A mother and 2 daughter-in-laws. And so one daughter-in-law follows the mother back to her homeland and is gleaning in the fields of Boaz. And Boaz is wealthy, notices Ruth and tells his folks, like, don't give her a hard time. Let her continue to glean. It was almost the social services of the day, how the community took care of each other. And in his noticing her, ultimately they got married. And so they are listed in the lineage of King David, so the lineage of Jesus Christ. And she's often said that her faith sometimes feels like charades. Like, is she doing the right thing? Is this really what you want? And as she was reading it, she very clearly heard, no, this is not about leftover people, leftover places, or leftover things. It's in the noticing, and it's in the recognition that you and I are sitting here both as maybe Boazes with gifts and talents and things that people have poured into us and told us we could do things, and we operated out of that. But we're also sitting here with needs that we can't meet ourselves. And so we often say to our volunteers, to anyone that wants to learn about us, is recognize that duality. Like, the neighborhood we're in, the people we're serving, that they would typically be called Ruths, but we see them as both, right? So if we can draw that understanding and have an experience that's different than maybe what we would originally think, it changes hearts and minds.
Powerful. Absolutely powerful, especially the reframe. I'm hearing that it's a reframing of how we view people in society, how we view people in our neighborhoods, how we view our communities. Mm-hmm. Wow. Absolutely love that. And in addition to that, that connecting thread for Boaz and Ruth is how deeply your efforts and work are rooted in your community, specifically the Highland Park community, could you speak more on why staying grounded in one neighborhood has been a priority?
Yeah, well, I think early on in our years, Boaz and Ruth was in the middle of the census tracts with all 6 of the 8 most returning citizens came back to our neighborhood. And so when you're serving people and you're coming back home from incarceration and you want something different, you're in your own neighborhood, right? And so over time, we also had the goal of connecting people. So connecting people across race, economic, and geographic divides of the city. And so there again, it was important that people came to Highland Park to experience something different, to meet people that were different than them or had a different life experience. And over time, or as in a lot of the country, right, there's rising housing costs. We're not unaffected by that. So we are experiencing within our own neighborhood rising costs of real estate. And so we're experiencing displacement and some gentrification. And so as an organization and as a board, we've decided to re-entrench ourselves into the idea of maybe we don't need to be as focused about connecting across the geographic divides of the city. Maybe our calling now is building those bridges across our community members within Highland Park. So the people we're serving through our affordable housing, the new residents that are coming, and then legacy residents of Highland Park. How do we position ourselves to be a bridge there?
Awesome. Love that. Love that bridge and connection is staying local as well. And I see that you yourself, Megan, have been with the organization for many years and in various leadership roles as well. So you must have seen and even led a lot of those efforts. Can you tell us, in your years with the organization, what efforts stand out as having been or even being particularly effective? Maybe even more than what y'all were originally anticipating.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly think over the years, we didn't start out providing housing. And then as we were serving people, we recognized that stable housing is such a core for people to have stable lives. And so we were able to purchase homes that every building that we have was vacant when we purchased it. So we weren't displacing people, we were providing new life to spaces and opportunity. And I see that that is one of the core things as external pressures change and communities change, being able to have the amount of real estate that we have, which again, we didn't set out to be, we think it's an asset to the community to help create mixed income communities and have a more rich fabric of a community. So that's one of the things that we're especially proud of. I think one of the other things that we've seen is, every organization tracks data. And when we look at the people that we're serving through our affordable housing, to me, it's amazing. So we are income restricted. It's 50% of HUD's area median income. So for the city of Richmond, it's just above $39,000. The average income of our adult residents in 2024 was just over $14,000. So here we are in a community where real estate prices are, $400,000, which 20 years ago, that same house would have been less than 100. It makes a big difference to be able to say we're standing firm on access for folks that where else would they go?
Very important. And access is so important as well for us as we serve the community health centers and ensuring that people have access, regardless of their ability to pay, regardless of their insurance status with the community health center. So access, when you speak of that, when it comes to housing and the gaps in how much people are earning in income versus what the cost is, it's vital. It's crucial. It's people's ability to live.
Yeah. And I imagine the people that you're serving, you see how the social determinants of health are impacted by housing, right? So if someone doesn't have stable housing, how are they able to prioritize health?
Yeah. A lot of intersectionality between what we do at the association, what our health centers do, and what you all are doing as well with your organization. And thank you for sharing some of that data too. When you talked about the houses themselves and where they're located, how far is the span that you all go, since it's mostly focused in that Highland Park area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so all of our real estate is within a 2-block radius of our main building. However, we work to connect through Highland Park, more globally as a neighborhood. And so that footprint is a bit bigger, and it's about 4,200 community members within the Highland Park neighborhood.
Wow, that's a lot. 4,200. Wow.
We don't reach everyone, of course.
But is there any talk of expansion in the near future, expanding more widely, but also into other neighborhoods, or is that not on the table at this time?
It's not on the table at this time. We've talked over the years about how do you replicate this model, right? So how could someone else do it? I think we have great community organizations in town that are also other neighborhood specific. And so we look to them as maybe co-creators of building a better Richmond. But right now, currently, what we're focused on is really how do we, Richmond is going through a rezoning process through what's called the Richmond 300, which is a master plan. And so we're paying close attention to that, because the idea of density, what does that look like for a community, and how does Boaz Ruth potentially work along the lines of new density allowances of by right? And so is there an opportunity for us to maybe expand our affordable housing programming through renovations and then by right additions onto the land that we already have?
Thank you for sharing that with us too. That leads me to think, is there a larger ecosystem of organizations that you're already working with that are doing this similar neighborhood-based work, or that maybe have inspired some of the ideas or inspiration shared between communities for programs?
Yeah, absolutely. So the two that I think of as North Stars in our town are Virginia Community Voice. And they actually have a blueprint of what does it look like to have equitable community engagement. And so we've done some of their trainings to understand it's really about relationship building. It's not about us identifying a need and saying, here's what we think you need. It's really lifting up community voices. And our job is to be responsive to what the community desires rather than what we prescribe for them. And then the other one is the Neighborhood Resource Center in Fulton. They are the same in terms of deep relationship among the people that they're serving, and really allowing the people that they're serving or the people we're serving to be our leaders, and we're serving rather than us leading folks.
That's great. What are some examples in Boaz and Ruth's programming of community responsiveness in that way?
So we have quarterly meetings with our residents. And so the goal of those meetings is to, one, help educate our residents on what are their rights and responsibilities, because we think you might not always live with us. And so we want you to understand what is in a lease. And so what are the things that protect you? What are the expectations? And during each of those meetings, we provide surveys and we ask, well, how are you satisfied with the quality of the buildings that we're providing, right? The services and amenities. What are some things that you would like to see that Boaz and Ruth currently isn't doing? And so after each one of those quarterly meetings, we go back and review that to help us guide and understand what is it that we should be doing as an organization to better serve our residents. And so of that, we've seen that there is a desire for greater community within our own residents, not within necessarily the wider Highland Park neighborhood. And so we have started doing quarterly community events. So you all came and participated in our National Night Out. That's a pretty big community event. Some of our folks didn't feel comfortable in participating in that last year. And they came to us and said, we'd like to have something like that, but for us. And we said, oh, we could easily have a Boaz and Ruth night out. So, we had a cornhole. Some of our board members came and we had a cookout. And so how can we honor that our residents are also looking for community building opportunities? So that's one. Another one is we brought in an organization that talked about mental health. And so some of the guys it's not necessarily close in terms of proximity to Boaz and Ruth and Highland Park. And so they learned of their services. And then we had a volunteer say, hey, I'm active in the recovery community based on his own life experience. And he wondered, was there an opportunity for him to lead some sort of conversation that is open format of what are the stressors in your lives? What is it that we can come alongside each other and recognize we have the answers among ourselves? And so staff doesn't participate. This volunteer comes in. It's now become a monthly program. It's called Brotherhood Matters. It's an evening, 2 hours of the month, and it's open to all of our residents. And each time it's a different mix of residents and it's open format. What is it that you're experiencing and how are you navigating it? The answers come from each other.
And if you had a message to maybe other organizations in Richmond or even community members who wanted to get in touch with you all, learn more about you all, what would be the best way to contact you all?
Absolutely. So anytime, right? Phone calls, emails are on the website. Mine is just Megan@boazandruth.com. We welcome those opportunities. We are beginning a monthly coffee and conversation. So if folks wanted to come for a tour, or if that doesn't work for their schedules, we're happy to do kind of one-off meetings. But we think it's important that people learn about what's happening in their own communities.
And is there anything that we haven't already talked about that's maybe next for Boaz and Ruth, or that you would like to share with us, Megan?
Yeah, I think no, not other than the normal kind of nonprofit. We can't do this work without people being willing to amplify our voices. So you all having us today is so big for us, and we're so thankful. And just the ongoing work of people that recognize the value of volunteerism. Right, Adrienne, where we wouldn't normally see that healthcare is a group that we want to reach out to for volunteerism, but you guys coming is going to make a difference in the lives of the neighborhood and the people that we serve. And so it's looking for those maybe unlikely alliances that maybe aren't as natural as what you might think. So that's what I would say in terms of what's next, right? It's really coalition building is the goal.
Love that. And we are so glad to be a part of that coalition in this build, in this time. Megan, thank you so much for being here and for joining us today. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Adrienne. I enjoyed it.
I'd like to thank Megan for joining us today to share more about Boaz and Ruth's mission and work and the value of that work being rooted in one's community. The VCHA team was privileged to be able to contribute to their mission in even a small way, and I hope this discussion encourages you to seek out and support organizations who might be doing similar work in your neighborhood. As always, thank you to our listeners for tuning in to CommonHealth, brought to you by the Virginia Community Healthcare Association. If you enjoyed this episode and you would like to help support CommonHealth, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button, share it with others on social media, leave a 5-star rating and review, and visit our website at www.vcha.org.